A man stands on the windswept hill above Salamis, watching 300 Greek ships row into the Narrows. Every one of them is there because of him. In 10 years, he will be hunted by the very city he saved. In 20, he will be eating dinner at the table of the Persian king. This is how the savior of Greece became its most wanted traitor. The strange part is that nobody saw it coming. Not the Athenians cheering his name in the agora. Not the Spartan kings who toasted him as the greatest mind in Greece. Not in the Themistocles himself, on the night Athens burned and he convinced an entire civilization to bet its survival on him. To understand how a man falls that far, you have to understand how high he climbed, and what he had to become to get there. He was born around 524 BC on the wrong side of Athenian society. His father was a respectable but unremarkable citizen. His mother, by most accounts, was not even Greek. In an Athens obsessed with bloodline and pedigree, that made him an outsider before he ever spoke a word. The aristocratic boys trained at elite gymnasiums. Themistocles was sent to the one reserved for those of mixed birth. He noticed, he never forgot. While other children played, he was already rehearsing speeches alone, imagining himself arguing cases in the assembly. His tutors called him strange. His relatives called him driven. One ancient writer said he could not sleep because the trophies of Miltiades kept him awake. He wanted glory the way other men wanted air. And he had a gift no aristocrat could buy. He remembered everything: names, faces, grudges, debts owed, and debts unpaid. He walked the streets of Athens learning the city the way a general learns terrain. By his 30s, he was elected archon, one of the highest offices in the city. But the office was a stepping stone. What he wanted was bigger than a title. He wanted to remake Athens itself. For centuries, Athens had been a land power, hoplites in heavy armor, citizen farmers who fought for a season and went home. Themistocles looked at his city and saw something different. He saw the sea. The Aegean was a highway. Whoever controlled it controlled the grain, the trade, the future. He began arguing, year after year, that Athens needed a fleet. Not a handful of ships, but hundreds. The old families laughed. Ships were for merchants and mercenaries, not gentlemen. Then came the Persians. In 490 BC, a Persian army landed at Marathon. Athens marched out and won a miracle. The hero of that day was Miltiades, an aristocrat of the old school. The whole city celebrated him. Themistocles celebrated too, then quietly told anyone who would listen that Marathon was only the beginning. Darius would die, his son would come back, and he would not come with a raiding force. Few believed him. Persia was a world away. The victory at Marathon had felt like the end of the story. Themistocles knew it was the prologue. In 483 BC, the gods handed him a gift. A new vein of silver was struck at the mines of Laurium. A fortune, suddenly, belonging to the people of Athens. The assembly debated how to split it among the citizens. Themistocles stood up and proposed something close to madness. Give the silver to the state and build 200 warships. He did not mention Persia. He framed it as a war against Aegina, a small rival island the Athenians actually hated. It was political genius. He sold a Persian defense as a neighborhood grudge. The vote passed. The silver went to the shipyards. For 3 years, the Piraeus rang with hammers. 200 triremes took shape on the slipways. He drafted thousands of common Athenians as rowers, poor men, landless men, men the old aristocrats had always dismissed. He was building more than a navy. He was building a new Athens, one where a man with no estate could still be the heart of the city's power. The aristocrats sensed it and hated him for it. But the ships were finished just in time. In 480 BC, Xerxes crossed into Europe with the largest army the ancient world had ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of men, a fleet that blackened the water, engineers who bridged the Hellespont with ships. The Greek city-states met in council, and most of them were ready to surrender. Themistocles refused. He went to Delphi. The oracle told the Athenians their city was doomed, that only a wooden wall would save them. Old men said it meant the wooden palisade around the Acropolis. Themistocles stood up and said no. The wooden wall, he argued, was the fleet. It convinced the entire population of Athens to abandon their city. Women, children, the old, the sacred statues, all loaded onto ships and ferried to safety. When the Persians arrived, they found Athens empty. They burned it anyway. The temples on the Acropolis went up in flame, the smoke visible for miles across the water. Athenian sailors watching from their ships wept. Their homes, their gods, their history, all gone. Themistocles did not weep. He had work to do. The combined Greek fleet had gathered in the straits near the island of Salamis. The other admirals wanted to retreat south, defend the Peloponnese, abandon central Greece. Themistocles knew that if they scattered, the Persians would pick them off one by one. He argued through the night. He threatened. He pleaded. By some accounts, he even said the Athenians would sail away and found a new city in Italy if the others would not stand and fight. Still, they wavered. So he did something only he would dare. He sent a secret messenger to Xerxes. The message, according to ancient sources, said the Greeks were about to flee, and if the Persian king wanted to destroy them, he should block both ends of the strait tonight. It was a trap inside a trap. He was using the enemy to lock his own allies into the battle he wanted. By dawn, the Persian fleet had sealed the straits. There was nowhere to run. The Greeks would fight at Salamis whether they wanted to or not. What followed was one of the most decisive battles in human history. The Persian ships were larger and more numerous, but the strait was narrow, and their numbers became a curse. The Greek triremes, lighter and faster in the tight water, slammed into them at full speed. Xerxes watched from a golden throne on the shore as his invincible navy was shattered. By evening, the sea was choked with wreckage. The Persian fleet was broken. The invasion of Greece was effectively over. And the man who had made it happen, the outsider, the son of a foreign mother, was suddenly the most famous Greek alive. When he visited Sparta, the Spartans crowned him with an olive wreath, an honor they had never given a foreigner. They sent him home in a chariot escorted by 300 elite warriors. Athens received him like a god. For a moment, he was untouchable. And that moment was the trap. Because Themistocles, having saved his city, could not stop. The walls of Athens had been torn down by the Persians. He insisted on rebuilding them, taller and thicker than before. Sparta objected. A walled Athens was a threat. So Themistocles went to Sparta personally as an ambassador, installed, and lied, and smiled. While he kept the Spartans talking, every Athenian, man, woman, and child hauled stones and rebuilt the walls in a frenzy. By the time Sparta realized it was too late, the walls were up. He had tricked the most powerful army in Greece, and he had done it openly, with charm. The Spartans never forgave him. Then he turned to the harbor. He fortified the Piraeus into a war port. He told the Athenians, in so many words, that their future was not on land, but on the waves. Their empire would be a sea empire. He was right. Within a generation, Athens would dominate the Aegean. The golden age of Pericles was built on the foundations Themistocles laid. But he would not live to see it. Before we follow him into the dark, I want to stop here for a moment. If you had been in that assembly in 83 BC, would you have voted to give up your share of the silver, on the word of one man, for ships against an enemy who had not yet come? Was Themistocles a hero of Greece, or just a brilliant operator who got lucky with timing? Tell me in the comments. I read them. I am genuinely curious which side of him you see. Now let us watch him fall. The same qualities that had made him great in war made him unbearable in peace. He boasted, openly, about Salamis, about the walls, about how Athens owed everything to him. He built a private shrine near his house, dedicated to Artemis, the best counselor, a not-so-subtle reminder of whose counsel had saved the city. In a democracy that prized humility, this was poison. The aristocrats he had pushed aside began to whisper. He was getting rich. He was taking bribes from foreign cities. He was conducting his own foreign policy without the assembly. Some of these charges were probably true. Many ancient politicians took gifts. Themistocles never bothered to hide his. And as memories of Salamis faded, the whispers grew louder. A new generation of leaders rose. Cimon, son of Miltiades, the war hero he had eclipsed years before. Aristides, the rival he had once driven into exile, they began to work against him. In Athenian democracy, there was a tool for exactly this moment: ostracism. Once a year, citizens could vote to exile any one man for 10 years. No trial, no charges, just a name scratched on a piece of pottery. Around 471 BC, the shards came out. The name written most often was Themistocles. The man who had saved Athens was given 10 days to pack and leave. He went to Argos and lived quietly for a while. He must have believed he could ride out the decade and return. But Sparta was patient, and Sparta was watching. A scandal erupted involving a Spartan general named Pausanias, the hero of the land battle of Plataea. Pausanias was accused of secretly negotiating with Persia. He was caught, walled into a temple, and starved to death. Among his papers, the Spartans claimed, were letters implicating Themistocles in the same treason. Whether the evidence was real or planted, we will never know. The Spartans had every reason to want him destroyed. They went to Athens and demanded he be tried for treason against all of Greece. Athens, eager to please Sparta and rid itself of an embarrassing legend, agreed. Officers were sent to arrest him in Argos. He ran. What followed reads like a thriller. He fled across the Peloponnese. He took ship across the Aegean with assassins on his trail. At one point, the ship was driven by storm toward the very Athenian fleet that was hunting for him. He revealed himself to the captain and told him the truth, that the captain now held the savior of Greece in his hands. The man kept his secret. They sailed on. Themistocles crossed mountains. He hid in royal courts. He moved by night. And finally, in a twist that no playwright would dare invent, he made the only move left to him. He walked into the court of the Persian king. Xerxes was dead by then. His son Artaxerxes sat the throne. The new king was told that the most wanted man in Greece, the architect of Persia's greatest defeat, was asking for sanctuary. Themistocles asked for a year to learn the Persian language and customs. Then, he said, he would speak for himself. A year later, he stood before Artaxerxes and made his case. The king, by all accounts, was charmed. He gave the exile 3 cities in Asia Minor, their revenues meant to provide his bread, his wine, and his meat. The savior of Greece now lived as a Persian lord, eating at the expense of the empire he had crushed. He lived this way for years. He learned the language. He raised his children at the Persian court. What he felt, history does not record. There were no triumphal moments, no campaigns, no assemblies to dazzle. Just a man in late middle age, in a foreign land, who had nowhere left to go. The end is unclear. By some accounts, the Persian king eventually asked him to lead a campaign against the Greeks, and Themistocles, unable to either betray Greece or refuse the king, took his own life with poison. Other ancient writers say he simply died of illness, a quiet death in a quiet town. Either way, the man who had decided the fate of nations died far from the city he had saved. His bones, the legend says, were secretly carried back to Attica by his family and buried in Athenian soil. It was the only way home left to him. And here is the strange thing. Athens, having exiled him, having condemned him, having driven him into the arms of the enemy, never really stopped owing him. Every silver coin of empire that flowed into the city came down the sea lanes he had imagined. Every wall that held off invasion was a copy of the wall he had tricked Sparta to allow. Every great Athenian moment of the next century, the age of Pericles, the Parthenon, the theater of Sophocles, sat on a foundation laid by a man buried in disgrace. He had given his city a future, and the city had repaid him with exile. That is the cruel arithmetic of democracy. The same people who love a savior in a crisis tend to fear him in peace. A man who can convince 100,000 people to burn their homes and board ships is not a man you want hanging around once the danger is gone. Themistocles understood power better than anyone in his generation. What he never understood was gratitude. He thought saving Athens would make him untouchable. Instead, it made him unbearable. His true gift was not military genius. It was foresight, a kind of cold, clear vision of where the world was going. He saw the sea before anyone. He saw Xerxes before anyone. He saw the future Athens before anyone. But foresight is a lonely gift. The people you save rarely understand how close they came, and they rarely thank the man who scared them with the truth. If you have made it this far, you already know how rare a story like this is. A man who saves a civilization and dies under a foreign king's roof. If it moved you, tap the like. It genuinely helps the channel keep telling stories like this one. Subscribe if you want more rulers, more conquerors, more lives that bend history into strange shapes. And tell me in the comments which ruler you want next: a Roman emperor, a medieval king, a forgotten queen. I am writing the next list based on what you asked for, because the next story I am working on is about a man who did the opposite of Themistocles. A man his own city worshipped while he was alive, and quietly erased the moment he was gone. His name still echoes, you just have not heard it told this way. I will see you there.